Okay, thank you, everybody. Who asked the question in the last session about universal basic income? Who was that gentleman? This session is for you. This is all about there. So, Scott, I want to read from an article that ran in The Atlantic in May 2015, written by a colleague about you. It was an incredible. It says, Scott Santens has been thinking a lot about fish lately. Specifically, he's been reflecting on the aphorism, if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach a man to fish, he eats for life. What Santens wants to know is this: if you build a robot to fish, do all men starve or do all men eat? And that takes us into kind of the question, because we're looking at the future of work and we're looking at really the future of the social contract. And you yourself have taken an unusual course, which is to live the world of basic income and crowd fund your life. So take us there and tell us why you've made this and how it's going, how it's working.
Yeah, so I got into this idea back in 2013, and it was really through the technology route. It was looking at this future that we're going towards. And something that's so interesting about this is that we're even like here right now, and it's more of a negative way. Like we're thinking about what could happen about like employment and the loss of employment, instead of thinking like, well, isn't the entire point of technology to actually work for us and allow us to make more choices as to how we wish to choose to work and choose to live, and have those options? I got into this, and when I started to look into basic income, I know it just was mentioned recently too. There's not a whole lot of data, but there is a whole lot of evidence out there for cash transfers and the effects of just giving people money unconditionally. And if you look into that, it's just absolutely fascinating. And I got into that, and I realized that this is so much more about, let's say, preventing a dystopia. It's a way of actually really improving a whole lot of measures across the board. And when I realized that, I figured that this is something that I have to put all my time into, which also brings up this question: when you look at the future of work, we seem to be assuming it's the future of paid work. And we're kind of leaving out the future of unpaid work, which actually tends to be some of the most valuable work that you can do. And that's what I'm doing, is I'm working for free. I blog and I write, and occasionally I'll sell like an article or something, but I'm doing this because I feel it's extremely important and valuable work. And I'm one of those people that wakes up every day that's excited to do this. And so I felt that I needed to try to crowdfund this basic income that was through Patreon. Patreon is kind of a Kickstarter for creators. And I figured I could leverage that and hopefully gather enough patrons together so that we're actually appreciating and liking my work.
You've got 253, I'm just counting right now.
Right.
Maybe it'll go up as a result of this. He's asking for $1 a month right now from your patrons, right?
Yeah, and that's purely to build security, because I already have a basic income, but I've actually noticed already that this is really about security. I didn't know how much security that we don't have until I have it. So even someone who has a job, they can worry that they're going to lose that job, and that's actually increasing. 60% of the country feels that they could lose their job, and about a third are like really worried about that. And when you're worried about that, when you have that insecurity, that actually has a lot of effects, even on our health, but also on the way we communicate. It has all these different second order and third order effects from this lack of insecurity. And when I got that security, that I realized that was actually such a strong thing. And so with 250 patrons, that is security far more than someone with, say,
so
a job.
just to put a money, so I'm on your page right now, and you've got $1,247 a month from 253 patrons. And for those of you who haven't seen this page, he has a kind of a donation roster of those who want to pledge $1 or more a month, $2 or more a month. For $5 or more a month, you get behind-the-scenes access. And I went onto his page, and he's got a tantalizingly available to that level of donor a draft of an article that you've written for Vox. So I'm interested in how you create kind of onion skins to your life. So I just want to ask, perhaps, it's not I don't mean to be unkind here, but aren't you like a blogger or a Kardashian or a performer who's actually doing something, and you figured out a way, like those people who are independent contractors with Uber, to connect in a different way? And so actually you actually are working.
Yeah, and that's also, I want to make that distinction too, again, between paid work and unpaid work. Now, the work that I'm doing, if I wasn't on Patreon, I would still be doing it, but the only way I could do it is if I had enough money to do it. So it's money that enables work. We have it so backwards.
Right.
Like, imagine when you get a job, you essentially have to work for 2 weeks before you usually get your first paycheck, right? So over that time, how are you working? Like, you have to be able to afford for food, you have to be able to afford for rent. So it's like you're doing all this unpaid work until you get the money to actually continue, but you need that money first in order to do work. So the difference between like what I'm doing and others are doing too is I'm actually pledging everything away that I earn above $1,000, because what I talk about with the basic income.
You give that to other people?
Yes, I pledge it to other people who are pledging to do the same. The point is I want to crowdfund a base of people who actually all have a basic income of $1,000 a month so that they can pursue the work that they most wish to pursue, and everyone else can, too. We're talking about building up these, when I talk about basic income is like this income floor. That's the really important aspect of this as well, is that will be underneath everybody as a minimum. It's not like you're only earning $1,000 a month.
Right.
You start at $1,000 a month and you earn on top of that.
So I guess my question is, to take it out of your particular case, is that those people who've become interested in this experiment, like what Y Combinator is doing and giving to a certain number of families in the Bay Area, $1,000 to $2,000 a month, at some level where that becomes a government priority, a shared taxpayer priority across a broad spectrum. And in Germany, for instance, I noticed there are 19,000 donors to 11 people. So one of the things that just immediately crashes into my mind in this is scale, right? There are very few of you, and to support 11 of you in Germany, it's taken 19,000 contributors. So how do you get out of the box of this being just in the private sector and into something that's broader from the government?
Well, yeah, I don't expect that we can actually crowdfund everybody's basic income. The reason that I did it is I needed that in order to actually talk about this and pursue this work and actually show the way that it works. It's an example. And the same within Germany is they're doing it as an example. In Germany, they do it for about a year at a time. It's kind of like a raffle system. So you get like a year's worth of basic income, and then that's it. And so what happens when people get that? We're learning a lot even from that for just a year at a time. Mine's slightly different because it's perpetual and it's for perpetuity. But it's really interesting to see how people actually use that income when it's given to them.
What do you think about the Y Combinator case? Is there any evidence that's come in? Are you familiar with the?
Oh yeah.
program?
It hasn't started yet. They're still working out the details, and it'll start in Oakland. They're actually doing like a pre-experiment before they go on to their major experiment. So they kind of just want to learn like the process of the actual experiment before they go on. But he's really interested in the effects of basic income on coming up with ideas on innovation, on entrepreneurship. Like, what is the effect on that? He's fascinated. So
let me ask you the cynic question, the big cynic question. Last night we were at dinner together, and you talked about the fact that if someone had this level of basic income undergirding their life, they might be then free to go do other kinds of activities in society that might not be compensated in a way, but nonetheless are very important. And it sounded to me as if it were kind of a utopian notion. And whether or not this is a kind of new socialism with a lot of kind of expectations and hopes that if we all did this, we'd be in a much more peaceful, wonderful world and everyone would get along. So have you kind of pressure tested this with someone like me who is just dark and cynical and skeptical of all kind of good things?
It's funny, and that kind of reminds me too of this great quote by someone you might know by the name of John Adams back in the day.
John Adams?
John Adams in the founding of our country. And he said that he must do the work of politics and war so that his kids could have the liberty to study science and math, philosophy, and that those kids could then pursue those things so that their own kids could actually pursue art and painting and music. Like the original idea from the founding of the country was that each generation could actually pursue the work that's actually more valuable to them. and that we could actually improve each generation. Now, for somewhere along the way, we lost this, and even like how we used to have World's Fairs, and the utopia was like, it's a good thing. We used to look at these things, and like Star Trek, like so much of what we've seen in Star Trek, we've actually made real because of that, like inspired us. So I don't think utopia is a bad word, and I also don't think it's not possible. We can never truly reach utopia. It's just a way of looking at the future so that we can try to continually improve, and we'll always get there, and then we'll improve some more. And it's funny too how here we are looking at the future of work, and we're worried about, say, losing half of our jobs, and at the same time we're not really thinking, well, doesn't that mean that we can all work half as much? Like, why isn't that something?
I want to go off the audience here, but again, the other thing after listening to you last night, I began thinking about this question of fish and robots and all that, and I began to wonder again if I were really an evil person, and I wanted to create avatars who looked really cool in the internet, who had great stories or great needs, and began funding them. Whether or not you could have automation take over this space and actually have lots of fake people pulling in revenue.
That's actually fascinating too, to look at these new forms of work that's coming out, like digitally, like online. Like I used to play World of Warcraft back in the day, and it's.
So you agree that this is a possibility?
There are forms of work right now that we don't think of as work. We actually think of it as playing games.
Right.
But at the same time, there's actually people, especially like in China, who are slaving away, actually mining digital gold, so that people like elsewhere can actually buy that gold with actual money, even though it's just purely ones and zeros. They're buying like digital swords and stuff that's ones and zeros. There's so much of this new.
So we are there now, basic income for robots. Let me open the floor to comments and questions. Yes, right here.
Hi, Chris O'Day. Can you go through and tell us, actually, in addition to the $1,000 a month, it sounds like you keep, right? What's your total income sources and where do they come from?
Oh,
I mean,
for
you're
me
living on
personally?
yeah. For $1,000 a month is what we all here in the audience now have as how much your income is. But what is your actual income? And that would be just really interesting to find out the full situation, because it does sort of sound like Steve said about
Sure.
The fact that you're a performer.
So, first of all, I'm choosing this work because I feel it's really important to do. So it's not like I have a lot of money. I feel that this is something that's just extremely important. So the amount that I earn on top of it is actually not that much. But the thing is that I share expenses. I live with my girlfriend, and we actually, share the expenses together. And so it's not like I'm living alone in, let's say, San Francisco, where my rent is going to be, say, $2,000 or $3,000 a month or something. Although even if I was, $1,000 a month would actually really help with that. And also, when you can actually pool those expenses as well. So, 3 people living together in San Francisco, each with $1,000 a month, that's $3,000 a month for their basic needs. And again, that's what it's only about too. It's just about covering the basics.
And do you pay taxes on that money? On your?
Yeah, and that's the way that it's not like a basic income, is
Right.
because I still have to pay.
You pay taxes, so it's like small business revenue or personal income and revenue. And then if your income is low enough, do you apply for something like the earned income tax credit? So which in a sense was supposed to be a buffer or support.
But the thing is too, it's really interesting as well, and it's something I've learned from this, is that as a able-bodied single adult, there's actually not a lot of assistance out there for anyone. Like most of the assistance is for those with dependents. And so when I, let's say, apply for the earned income tax credit based on my earnings, I think like recently it was like $5 or something.
Right.
It's like it's nothing.
Yes. Hi.
Hi there. So my question is, we didn't go too much into the how this could happen on a wider scale. And one of the things that I was thinking about was, our encore careers. So people who have pensions are often coming back into the workforce and
Right.
sometimes doing jobs that are much more meaningful. It also made me think about, how those pension systems are changing and, the past conversations that we've had today and threat to Social Security. So I'm wondering if you can kind of make a connection to those sorts of topics into what you're doing now.
Fascinating. Yes.
Okay, so it's a good example too to look at even evidence that we have for those for basic income from those who actually have pensions, because actually my father retired from the military at around 40, and so he's actually had that government pension as his income floor for his whole life after that. And that didn't mean he stopped working. You know, he had jobs after that as well. And I'm not sure if by scaling, if you mean also that one way of implementing a basic income could actually be through the Social Security system, because that is the most realistic that we would use. You need that register of legal residence, you know, and they each have a Social Security number. So we could just do $1,000 a month per Social Security number as one way to do it, or you could do it through the IRS as well. But that is just one way of actually implementing it.
Can we run to this gentleman in the back? Hi, thank you.
So
Tell us who you are.
Pardon?
I knew who she was because she'd spoken before, but tell us
my
her
name's
name.
Rogan Quinn. And when I hear Social Security thrown in, I think about the zero-sum game. Your income is someone else's deficit. So when we start to think about Social Security, the sustainability, we think about the dual deficit where we send dollars out and then they send them back to pay for our fiscal deficit. How would that be sustained when we're not sending money out, but we're sending it around?
So a big question. That's a good question.
Okay, so if you're asking more about like the big funding, since there is concerns about Social Security already, we do actually fund much of this already through both our existing welfare programs and also our existing tax credits and subsidies and deductions that we have. And I do also talk about how we could actually shift some of the money from Social Security over to the basic income in a way that still leaves every senior better off. And as well, all of the benefits from technology have for decades now been going mostly to the top. So it makes sense to actually raise revenue at the top, but in smart ways. Like, I think we can actually reduce income taxes at the same time as implementing this. It's just we need to do things like, establish like a carbon tax, financial transaction tax. And if labor is being replaced by capital, it also makes sense to actually tax that capital, to tax the capital gains, you know. There's a lot of ways of funding this in a way that's actually very sustainable, and it's also not as big of a cost as people think it is. And on the other hand, it's also very important when we're talking about the cost of basic income to consider what is the cost of not having basic income? What's the cost of poverty that exists right now? Because poverty is associated to so many things, especially if we're looking at healthcare costs and looking at the costs of our prisons. And even, I would say, the cost of our lost productivity with so many people who are disengaged in their work. What is how much more productivity would we have if people weren't insecure and weren't living in poverty? That one of the, if we're just talking about taxes, people who actually are in poverty are taxed about 13 to 14 IQ points. Like when you're only worried about making that next payment, meeting those bills, then you're actually thinking short term and you're not thinking long term. So I want to actually remove that tax as well and enable people to think more.
Do your friends think you're crazy?
No.
Okay, cool. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Santens from a Basic Income Advocate. Thank you so much for taking us on this journey.
Thanks for having me.